Hello, my name is Nick Carroll and welcome to part 4 of the $600 AMD Kaveri PC build. So in this video I'm going to do a brief review of the journey so far. I'm also going to talk about the operating system that I chose, how it installed and how it's been doing in the last week or so since part 3. And I also want to show you a little bit of the layout that I currently have with my desk and entertainment center with regard to this PC. So before I go to the rest of the video, let's go ahead and take a look at my current desk and entertainment center setup. So here's basically my current setup. You'll see here's the current PC tower and the arrangement that I have. Here's my desk in all of its glory here. Here's a little keyboard I picked up recently, the snowball mouse, speakers. Anyways, here's the build in all of its glory. I've actually deactivated this 120 millimeter fan because it glows red and at night it's annoying. Anyways, and here's the main screen that I use whenever I'm watching movies or viewing multimedia files at the end of a long day at work. And when I want to play games, this is basically where the magic happens. So as you can see, I've got a nice little setup. I've got a 46-inch HD TV in my bedroom. It's just a few feet away from my bed, and I basically use that to watch video, at night, watch movies, TV, etc. I also have cable, and sometimes I have a console or two hooked up to there. Depends on how things are going. Anyways, and then this desk that I do a podcast from, I do other things on, and gaming, all that stuff. So that's basically it. So this PC replaced an older one that I used. I picked it up in 2011, built it, put all the components together, installed Windows 7, and have been using it in a pretty dedicated fashion ever since. Well, I needed something to essentially replace it so I can pass it down to one of my daughters, and also so I could pass down my wife's old PC that she doesn't use to one of her other daughters. So that's basically the reasoning behind getting this new computer. Also, there are some games that I've heard about recently that I've wanted to try out, and I was willing to purchase or otherwise obtain, essentially, to play. So what spurred me to purchase this specific build was Battlefield 4 was included with this, and since it was a bundle assembled by Newegg, essentially everything put together by Newegg in terms of all the items, had a pretty high confidence level in terms of the items selected and compatibility of those items. And so that's basically what took me down this road. Also wanted to pick up Titanfall and try it out, play around with it for a little bit. Then if I decided to get back into gaming, I could later on invest in a video card. So one of the requirements for this specific build was that it had decent onboard graphics and a relatively low TDP. Basically, I didn't want a very power-hungry system from the get-go. I wanted to operate as a multimedia center, and that's essentially what the role this is going to fulfill, with some light gaming as an option. And if I choose to continue down the path of gaming like I used to do up until 2007, I could then invest in a video card. So anyways, that's a little bit of the backdrop. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Windows install real quick. Now, I decided to go for Windows 8.1 this time as opposed to Windows 7, even though my existing copy of Windows 7 I could have used on this one because I was going to replace it with a different serial that was going to be used for my daughter, but then I was going to use my existing one and continue to use Windows 7. But I'd heard some good things about Windows 8.1, basically changing some things for the better for the Windows operating system, bringing back the start button without, hackery, and, providing some options that would basically allow the desktop to come to the forefront. So that was enough for me. So that plus some slightly better compatibility and a lot less updates was what I heard was on the menu. So what I did was after I filmed a PC build video,
The day after, I basically installed Windows 8.1, and I have to say the install was over in a half hour, in under a half hour, and the updates, it was only like one major set of updates and then another minor set of updates the next day, and that was basically it. In the meantime, since I loaded up the operating system, performed the Windows update, and installed a handful of applications that I use from day to day, I have also installed Windows 7 brand new on my wife's old PC and my old PC for my two daughters. And in that case, in both cases, man, it was like you install Windows, it takes like an hour, and then when it's done, it's like literally an all-day process of performing updates. Like I stopped counting, but it was like a dozen or so sets of updates throughout the entire day to update it all. So it was kind of a surprisingly good experience for me updating to Windows 8.1 in this case, because it was a lot quicker to install and to update, and I kind of like having the other functionality of the Metro or Modern UI, but realistically I don't use it that much, and I've yet to really make use of the Start screen, or as a replacement of the Start menu that I used to have. One thing that I liked was the drivers installed, a lot of base level drivers installed well enough to get this online. Basically, once all the updates were done, it was pretty much good to go. I went to the GIGABYTE website and downloaded all the latest driver updates there, with the exception of the video driver. Well, actually, I did also install the GIGABYTE video driver, and then after that, I went to AMD's website and downloaded their update for an even newer version of the driver. So that worked pretty well. Also, as a little bit of a disclaimer, the system that I built is a little bit changed now as it was then. What I did is, since I have an old computer with several hard drives in it and roughly 8 terabytes of hard drive space, I basically moved all that over to this computer, and so it's not exactly as it was when I built it. I've added a lot more storage on it. Also, I'm running an SSD as a primary drive now. I decided to do that because I wanted to have essentially Windows on the drive, on the primary drive, and then other than essential applications and all my media and other files stored on the other drives. So what I did is I purchased Samsung 840 Pro SSD. It's a SATA 3 SSD. It's a 256 gig drive, and that actually made as my primary drive, and the 1 terabyte drive just fit in there along with all the other drives that I have, and I've got 8 terabytes of storage now. I had 7 before, and now I've got 8. So that worked out well for me. So what I want to do next is kind of review a little bit of the old build and talk about some of the unique things about it. Number one, first and foremost, the power supply that was part of the build, as you will have noticed if you watched the last couple videos, does not really go well with that bundle. I called Newegg. I was going to arrange to send that back and get a replacement, but there would have been a restocking fee because it had been opened and put to use, and B, there would have been shipping involved in terms of sending it back. So I was a little bit cross about that, but I talked with my oldest son, and his PC had a power supply that was compatible with my system, and my power supply was compatible with him, so we arranged a quick trade. And one of the 3 120 millimeter fans that was in my unit, I basically sacrificed. I gave to him to replace one of his old ones that basically died. He actually has a discrete video card as well as an APU from a year back. So his power consumption is a little bit more than mine. It's like 200 plus watts as opposed to my 120 or so watts right now. So we were both within spec with regard to the wattage, but because he has a video card and his computer would run a little bit hotter, he needed one of my fans, at least more than I do. Also, this left me with 2 120 millimeter fans, right? Well, actually, this machine runs so cool that I actually turned off or unplugged the front 120 millimeter fan, because even though it's kind of pushing air into the fan, helping with circulation, honestly, there's just an APU running in here, and even when I play games, it doesn't get that hot. So I've got that unplugged because there's a bright red LED on there, and at night when my computer's running, that red LED lights up the bedroom, and quite frankly, I don't need that. So I unplugged it. I'm going to actually order a replacement 120mm fan. I'm actually going to order 2 of them and put them in the front and back. And these are actually going to be the 4-pin interfaces. Let me look up that interface. Okay, so the 4-pin interface is called a PWM header. I forgot about that from a long time ago. It's a pulse wave modulation. What it does is it basically operates at 12 volts, but instead of it being a solid 12 volts, it basically pulses, but very quickly. So you get very quick pulses that speed up and reduce the speed of the fan, but it does it intelligently. So you have 2 of these adapt connectors on the motherboard, and I intend to plug the front one and the back one to each of those 2 and have the power come from the motherboard, but also the modulation, and those will work with the GIGABYTE software for the motherboard to run the fans as low as needed if CPU temperature doesn't rise, or if CPU temperature rises, or temperature maybe elsewhere on the motherboard rises, then the fans will kick in more to help do cooling. So I'll do that at some point in the future. So that's one of the things I'm going to do. So the 2 120mm fans I've gotten in there, I'm actually going to remove, put in a couple new ones. So to continue on that statement of hardware, I want to say that the power supply that I have swapped out, I will actually list in the description below, and basically I recommend any other power supply other than what was listed in this build, mainly because while that's compatible with some of the older cases, it's not compatible with this case in particular. So and actually in hindsight, I should have actually done research on every one of the components. You know, I'm actually a little bit of a jaded PC builder in that I've been building PCs for so long that I'm just used to stuff working. That was one of the advantages of building PCs, is it's almost impossible to find a mismatch in terms of components. If you just go down the list and order the right types of motherboards and cases and power supplies and you name it, that stuff just works. That's just the legacy of PC building. That's the rule, not the exception. And I happened to stumble upon an exception, one that I did not plan for. Newegg never steered me wrong, and it's a weird coincidence that this occurred. And so I'm not going to knock them on it, because probably like me, they assumed, well, it's just PC parts. Of course they'll all work together. You know, but it was SFX power supply, small form factor type of design. And basically the cable it's a foot-long cable, and it's great if the power supply is on top of the case, and that is generally more than enough to lead to the motherboard power connector, which is generally towards the top. But if it's bottom fed, and if it's particularly a smaller PSU, that cable has to go a lot further, and it's just a rare occurrence. Unless you experience it, or maybe you read a review about it, or something, it's not something you're going to stumble upon too much. But the bottom mount cases are now becoming more and more popular, so it's something I should have, you know, maybe thought about, but I didn't. But not a big deal. So that's what this whole video series is about. I could have easily, you know, swiped it under the rug or made it not a part of the series, and, you know, just waited a day to publish the video with just a swapped power supply and just mention it as a blurb. But this is one of the things to look out for with regard to PC builds. Just because the website has a PC build, all the components listed as compatible, doesn't mean they're actually compatible. So that's something to look out for. So unless you're buying a system that's already put together, if you're buying all the components, that the onus is upon you to basically research those components and make sure that they're all compatible. And that's actually what I'm doing now for a friend. I'm building a computer for him, and he's actually ordering some parts and sending them to me now. Some parts have already arrived, and I'm making sure that all of his parts will actually be compatible, so we don't have to go through this issue in the future when I'm building his system together. That's basically the warning I want to leave to everyone. If you're building a system, check all components for compatibility. Now I'm going to go off on a different tangent. At the bottom of this PC case, this Rosewill case, which I'll leave in the description below, I can't remember what it's called. I'm not sure why. I can't recall the exact model of it. But regardless, this case has at the very bottom a location for mounting an SSD on it. That's nice. The problem is there's a magnetic section there, I guess, to sort of secure the hard drive there before you screw it in. The problem is if you use an actual notebook drive and not an SSD, those magnets will interfere with the operation of the drive and will damage it in a relatively short period of time. The reason why I found this out was I was grabbing an old notebook drive that I was going to use to put in one of my girls' PCs, and I thought to myself, hey, that looks like a SSD slot at the bottom. Let me connect the drive. And I put it down there, and I could feel like it moved a little bit. It's like, whoa, that's weird. And then I realized really quickly, whoa, that's magnetism. That's like magnetism is kind of moving the metal of that hard drive. And good old-fashioned hard drives, the ones we've been using for decades before these SSDs ever came out, and flash memory and SD cards, those are extremely prone to a damage due to magnets. You can basically erase all that information. So that's something to look out for. So just a note, the bottom of this case actually has magnets built into the bottom somewhere, somehow, into the very bottom of the case. And if you're using a traditional notebook drive down there because you think, oh, it'd be nice to plug in a notebook drive, don't do it. It'll interfere with it. That's only for an SSD. One thing I did after installing the system and putting everything together, I did a little bit of cable management to kind of move some of the stuff out of the way. I opted not to put it in video because honestly, once I set it up, I got really lazy and I was like, you know, I'm just going to stay here. Loaded it up with hard drives, got all the cables out of the way, unplugged that one fan in the very front. Quite frankly, I'm leaving it there. It's nearly dead silent because there's only one CPU fan and one power supply fan, and then one 120mm fan running out the back, kind of sucking air out of the unit, warmer air out of the unit, slightly warm air. It's very cool. It's one of the things I like about the system. It's very quiet and very cool. Thumb screws. That's what those things are called at the very back of the case. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. I know it was late at night. Thumb screws. Those are the kind of screws you use your thumbs to unscrew. And that's what those things are called. In hindsight, if I were not so allured by the appeal of Battlefield 4, or if I maybe thought differently, I would have gone with, just to be honest, a different combo bundle. In hindsight, I would have recommended myself or others doing a similar build. If they're going to go with an APU and they're going to go with the Battlefield 4 bundle, which incidentally at the time of this video is no longer an option, but at that time I would have recommended just the APU plus the game plus the dog tag, and then I would have bought the case or something similar, or I would have got maybe the case and that. I would have gone with a different combo. I would have not gone with the complete system combo, but I had such high hopes or such confidence really that everything would just work out the box like everything else has been in the past decade or so, decade or more I've ordered for Newegg. I would have ordered at a minimum a different power supply. For someone that's only going to run an APU or a very low power video card, I could see a 300-watt power supply being more than enough. But in hindsight and knowing what kind of a gamer I used to be, I would have, it's highly likely I'll choose a higher power video card that'll be more than a 300-watt power supply can provide. So I would have at a minimum got a different power supply from the get-go. And I would have ordered, honestly, an 80+ gold power supply, not an 80+ bronze, because I tend to want these things to last for a while. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the complications I've had with regard to the system itself. I don't know if the blame is to be with GIGABYTE, the manufacturer, like in terms of hardware. I don't know if it's a driver issue. I don't know if it's something on the end of Catalyst and AMD. But I have had some videos and issues with regard to video and audio playback. Let me start out with how this works with the two screens. This is identical to what I did before with my old Intel plus NVIDIA system that I built in 2011. I have a 1920 by 1080 screen, and it's mirrored on the two displays. One on the monitor in front of me, and two on the HDTV on the other side of the computer. And the issue that I've had is in terms of video quality. Somehow with the video mirrored onto the HDTV, the video quality isn't quite as good, and I can't figure it out. Like it's just lower quality, even though it's operating at 1080p. The video quality is lower compared to the monitor and compared to what the HDTV displayed previously with the old system. That I can't figure out. Number two is when I have both screens running and the same image is on the screen, as you saw in that little video clip earlier where you got to see both side by side, the same thing on both screens, audio starts clipping. And I noticed as audio is playing, if any of you guys have ever heard someone talking on a microphone and they speak with P's, with a P sound, and generally you get a pop filter to kind of prevent that P sound from affecting people listening to it, that sort of impact. Well, that sort of weird effect is occurring where it almost sounds like everyone needs a pop filter when they're speaking. It's only when the two screens are displayed. As soon as that high def TV goes off, the video blinks for a second here, and the audio clears up. It sounds perfectly normal, just fine, as if there's no issues. The instant I turn the high def TV on, all of a sudden I get like this audio issue. And it's like a little bit of a stuttering and certain, not pausing or hesitating, but just, it's very rough when harsh syllables are uttered. I can't explain it any better than that. So that's a little disconcerting, and something that I'm wondering if that'll require me getting a separate sound card at some point, or if I just need a better video card to install on this unit and use it like I did, the old system. And lastly, there's an issue with the microphone. Even though, alright, so I use a Logitech C920 webcam, and I use a blue Snowball microphone. Now, I have the option of using either the microphone on the webcam or the microphone on the blue Snowball. For some reason, even though I'm using the blue Snowball, and I can tell that audio is being sourced into the blue Snowball, into the, sourced from there into the computer, the volume level of the 920 webcam is what affects the volume that is being recorded. So that's really weird. I can choose the webcam or the microphone, and the audio will actually go into one of those, but the volume is dependent on the Logitech webcam. That's not something I've ever seen before. So it's kind of a weird issue, and it's just something that I've had to be mindful of, because I use this microphone for the videos that I record and when I do podcasts. So that's basically it, guys. This is honestly the quirkiest build that I've put together in years, and maybe a decade. Like I've put together a lot of systems, over time, for myself and for others, and as well as working on others. And I can't necessarily say this is a quality issue. It's just sort of a weird hodgepodge issue that I'm just not used to seeing. Generally when you buy $100 or more motherboard from GIGABYTE, you tend to get a really good motherboard. When you tend to buy a higher end APU or CPU from AMD, you get pretty good stuff. I bought two Richland or Trinity, this was from a year ago, Trinity APUs for my boys, as well as a couple mid to high end or mid-range video cards last year for them. I haven't had a lick of problems with those computers. So I'm thinking maybe this may be to some extent an issue with the APU only, on this computer, and maybe drivers or something. I don't know. I can't really complain. This computer has run, outside of those quirks, which I've been able to resolve for the most part, or come to terms with, this computer has run very smoothly. I've been able to run a number of games on here. In my next video, the fifth and final video, I actually go over some of the games that I've run and how this compares with the older system that I've run. But I have no real complaints. It was a learning experience. I'm glad that I went through it. I wish I had maybe handled it a little bit better in terms of reacting better to how it went, and maybe realize maybe I could trade the power supply with my son on the same day, or maybe I could have researched it a little bit better in the beginning. But it's a learning experience. I can't say that that I've learned nothing from it, or that I haven't enjoyed it. I've enjoyed most of it, and even in hindsight, the issues that I had, I can't really complain with in hindsight, because I hope this will help others. So anyways, that's gonna cut this long rambling video short. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.